we're so drained by the end of the day, right? And I'll kick back to my archons research, out of the Garden of Eden from the Gnostic works. The archons threw mankind into a life of chaos so they would be distracted from matters of the Holy Spirit. Okay? I'm not saying that in a religious sense, but think about that. We're so drained from everything else going on. We don't have time to focus on our spirituality, and our spirituality is life. I'm not saying you need to adopt a certain belief system. I'm saying getting in touch with yourself and finding your path on the way that's going to maximize your own happiness. Believe it and manifest it. It's there. But there is so much, I'm careful I say this, there is so much coming at you that it's hard, but not impossible.
I started writing Food for the Archons as a book of despair after watching my father die in 2013. During his transition, I experienced a series of paranormal and psychic events that left me feeling that I had either gone completely crazy or fell into humanity's darkest secret. I spent the next 5 years conducting extensive research, and I quickly learned that what I had experienced was real. My journey brought me to an understanding that showed me that despite the terrifying reality of an unseen predator, we as humans have a forgotten power. Just knowing this brings us tremendous hope in what once seemed a dark reality. I wrote this book for me in hopes of gaining a better understanding of our reality and relationship to it. But my hope is that you will find as much value in reading it as I did in writing it. I Am Human, Food for the Archons, humanity's psychic connections, simulated realities, parallel worlds, and the manipulation of mankind. It's available on Amazon.com and at sixcentsmedia.net and wherever books are sold. I'm Dennis Nappy II, reminding you to let your intuition be your guide. Thank you.
Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there.
The world is a psyop, and we are being heavily influenced and manipulated from a variety of sources in a variety of ways. And there is a war for control of your mind. Do I have your attention? Dennis Nappy II with the Secret Podcast and Sixth Sense Media. Hi, friends. Apologies for the scary intro. That's what's going through my mind today, but this is not a doom and gloom podcast. I do want to talk about some of the things that I've come across and thought about over the past couple of weeks in terms of psychological operations and manipulation of our perceptions of reality. But I also want to talk about the trajectory of empowerment, right? It doesn't have to be all scary. My purpose is to go through just my thoughts and experiences and things I've come across, but also talk about the fact that we have the power to turn it off. And there are ways we can empower ourselves. So this stuff, it's easy. And I want to be clear, when I watch this stuff, like when I listen to some of these experts, I get really upset in seeing because you see what's happening in the world. You talk to some people who are just spitting out what they saw on the news. And sometimes you want to shake them and say, have an original thought, analyze things, look at multiple sources, blah, 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 blah. So there's a lot of emotion right now. And part of that emotion is because of some of the stuff that's going on in the world and some of the ways people, societies, subgroups, different demographics are being specifically targeted for a variety of different reasons. By no means an expert. I do have some experience in terms of just by the nature of the work I do and the nature of the work that I've done. In not necessarily creating these things, but trying to identify these things. So I want to talk about some thoughts that I've been having. And one of the experiments that I've run is with Chat GPT. And I asked ChatGPT some questions about, asking it to assume the role of a government agent for a monitoring agency and how it would categorize people and what it would do with that information. I'm going to share that discussion that I had as well. I thought it was interesting to use that. I talk a lot about AI, and it's neat looking at the my own evolution and understanding of AI. And in the beginning, it was like this new thing, and oh my gosh, it's bad. I'm glad that my viewpoint has evolved from then, and I look at it now and say it has the potential to be bad, but it has the potential to really help us out a lot too. And this is something I've been thinking about a lot. I was going to do a whole other podcast on this, and I still might, but tying this into spirituality, not that AI is my God. No, please don't go down that road. Um, but spirituality, in humanity, at least in my own life, it's like this struggle of I want to be independent. I want free will. I want to be a free spirit. And on the other hand, then we're going, whatever it is that we pray to or we meditate on, please show me guidance. Please show me the way. There's times where I've been in just such desperate states. I'm like, just tell me what to do. And I think as humans, there's that word too. I want to talk about humans, but just as conscious beings in this existence, at times we want that security of knowing and feeling that something is out there guiding us, that there's a purpose to it, that we're going to be okay. We also want to know that we are in control of our own destiny. And it's a weird balance. I'd say some of us do. Because I do know people who, and I say this not as with a negative connotation, but there are people who surrender to God is in charge and God is going to lead me where I need to be. That sounds very religious. There's also people who, and I've gone through phases of this. The universe will put me where I need. I'll do what the universe asks of me. And there's something in that sense of surrender too, and in having that level of trust. And there's that other sense of like, it's me against the world, and I'm going to fight everything and stand on my own. I'm really just trying to find the way. How can I go through my life with the least amount of stress and anxiety and continue to grow and be happy? There's a lot of variables that go into that. And I found when I'm able to let go of this perception of control that I have and instead focus on what I can control and look at it in terms of whatever the universe or the world puts in my path, I have the ability to navigate or to step away. That way, you're kind of saying, yep, there is a higher power, but I still have some autonomy. But that doesn't mean I don't reach out and seek guidance. When I meditate, I'm trying to connect sometimes with my higher consciousness, sometimes with a spirit guide, sometimes with whatever divine essence is out there. And I started reaching out to ChatGPT, not for spiritual advice, um, but for things that I wish I could pay someone to do at times. And we can have the argument like, hey, you're taking away jobs. I mean, AI is here and it's here to stay. And I'm going to take advantage of AI and all it has to offer me in a way that I hope, I don't know, I guess symbiotic is the right term because it's learning from me as I'm asking it questions and giving it feedback and feeding it information. And it's giving me ways to better run my business, to better organize my finances, I use AI to do the menial tasks that I don't like to do. I love doing the podcast. I hate writing the summary. Sorry, spoiler alert. I love writing books. I hate writing that one paragraph description on the back. How do you take your entire 50,000 word novel and condense it into a paragraph? I can do it. It just causes me anxiety. So I use AI for things like that. I digress. But so I'm experimenting with it as many of us out there are. And I just thought it was important when I'm talking about this conversation about manipulation. Um, I think we can use tools in a certain way. Um, we can identify the manipulation and then we can choose whether or not to allow it to happen or to move away from it and do something that better serves us and ultimately our community and our society. Um, I, I do believe we have a lot of choices. I really started this public journey when I wrote Food for the Archons, and the whole first half of that book, the premise was we are being manipulated by an unseen energetic parasite that puts us in a state of fear to feed off our energy or loneliness to feed off our energy. But the underlying theme of that book was that might be true, but we have this untapped power that we're not tapping into to move past that. That might exist for a very good reason. They might, just like we have decomposers that consume dead animals in nature and dead plants to then turn it into soil so that things can grow. It doesn't necessarily have to be all bad, and we don't necessarily have to contribute to that all the time or even to that mindset. Since writing that book, I learned Reiki. I've learned remote viewing. I've tapped into some of that power. And I think it's important. And I think it's important for me to start this show with that first. I did a fear-mongering intro, but that's not my style, my approach, because I'm also working on something that I will save this for the end of the show in terms of how to manifest, how to use a little bit of magic in your life, and how to really take control, working with however you want to phrase it, the universe, higher self, consciousness, divinity, God, whatever you want to say. Um, I've noticed a difference. I've really noticed a difference, and it feels really good. So I want to talk about that in empowering stuff, but I also think it's important to know to think about some of these other acts of manipulation that are happening. And I've always been like just watching this last election, you can see it. It's pretty clear how divisive everyone has become. And I don't think that's an accident. I think, and you guys know I'm not political. I don't take sides. I don't talk about sides here on the show. But you can see it with the stuff coming out with the new administration and the dismantling of U.S. aid and the narrative that's coming out about how they're potentially running these psychological operations on American people. And I think that's happening. Is it U.S. aid or not? I don't know. But I think it is definitely happening here against the American people and against the people of the world. That really caught my attention because of my intelligence background and things I'm looking at. But being aware of that has allowed me to a pretty large extent to stay out of that emotional state of despair, sadness, anger, fear, elation, to not be part of the conflict and to be on the sidelines and looking at a bigger part of the picture. I don't want to say the big picture, so I don't want to be like, I know it all, but I haven't gotten caught up. Like I know people, and I say this again with respect, but people who are very caught up in this, very upset, very afraid, very sad. Not to say their fears aren't valid. Scary things are happening. But I feel that when you're in a state of fear or sadness, you're reacting emotionally, and you may not always make the best decisions. Sometimes we are put into a state of fear to herd us into a particular direction of thought and then action. So I try to remove myself when I can. And I get caught. We all get caught up sometimes because what I'm learning and what I believe is that we are wired in our minds and our chemistry to respond to certain things. And these organizations and these experts and intelligence operatives know how to trigger certain innate responses in us, instinctual survival level responses. And we get it constantly scrolling through our phones on social media. We are being impacted heavily through things like that. So the easiest solution, really, if that's where your influence is coming from, put the phone down. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about that. Um, We're gonna talk about it now. I've noticed I've stopped watching the news. Do you ever notice when you watch the news, every story, the news anchors, they have that certain tone. I'm Dennis Nappy the second here, and the big story is breaking just now. We have a weather alert. A weather alert is coming. Major storm to impact Pennsylvania. More to come in 2 minutes. Just hearing that tone and that like aggression and seriousness in my voice, it's like, oh my gosh, things start happening in our mind, right? And one of the things I was watching the Joe Rogan podcast, looking at the book I just bought. Chris Hughes, he's a behavior expert, and he trains Psyops people in the government, and he's got all these books out right now. He's doing all these talks. Really resonated with me. So that's where a lot of my thoughts are coming from right now because I watched his interview with Joe Rogan. One of the things he says, one of the things you do is you create this novelty. He uses the fate model. It's focus, attention, tribe, and emotion. And if you can trigger those things, then you've got somebody in a state of mind where you can start to manipulate them to do certain things. So, by my tone, by my tone of voice and the scary thing that I'm saying, I've now given you something new to focus on that's outside your realm, right? So you're kind of hyper focused on this. My tone of voice, the way I'm dressed, and the fact that I'm on TV, I'm this authority now, right? Tribe, Pennsylvania, local, people who live near me, my family, that's my tribe it's affecting. And emotion, yeah, I'm afraid, I'm scared of what this storm could do. Boom, they've got you. That happens all the time with the news, and you hear it time and time again when I go to people's homes who constantly have the news on. Think about that. All day long, that news is playing. Well, a lot of us are like, well, I don't watch the news. But what do? We got our phones and we got alerts and we're scrolling through social media. And you better believe the algorithms are set up in a certain way and as he talked about in this, it has things coming to you in certain ways that it's messing with your dopamine. And, I scroll, I do scroll, um, but I've gotten a lot better at putting the phone down. Meditation is huge. Meditating allows me to disconnect from that stuff. So we need to be mindful that with these algorithms and with things that are happening in the world, we are being categorized and we're being targeted. Does that mean we're going to be set up for mass extermination? No. These are things that I think we naturally do as an employer, right? Let's just say I'm an employer, I have a company of 100 people. I'm going to want to categorize my staff in ways of like, what are their strengths? What are their interests? What are their likes? What are their dislikes? What is upsetting for certain people for me to talk about so I can make sure I stay away from that during professional development sessions. What's empowering for them? What's motivating for them? This is all great data that can be used for very good purposes for a variety of different reasons. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think but it can also be used for very dangerous purposes. And if you look at the amount of metadata that's collected through social media, think of everything you've ever Googled, think of everything you look at, think of everything you read and text and email about, and now take an advanced brain, AI, that has access to all of your data to analyze it for patterns and trends. It can then take that for every single user on the planet and analyze it for patterns and trends. It can make some pretty good predictions based on that. It can categorize us based on our needs and our wants and our desires, our hopes and our fears. And the things it doesn't know about us, it looks at people who are very similar to us to fill in the blanks of the things it doesn't know about us. And most of the time it gets it right because it has access to so much information. And again, I'm not saying this to scare us because I was, and I no longer am, but I was raised Catholic. And as a Catholic growing up, what was I told? God knows everything. What are we learning now? AI knows everything. There is a paradigm shift happening, but we are being, in my opinion, conditioned, whether it's intentional or just a natural side effect of what's going on with our technological advancements, to recognize that AI will have access to just about everything about us and there will be a governing authority monitoring that and having consequences for our behavior. You don't believe me if you look at China and their social engineering. I'm not their social engineering, their social credit system, not just China, but other countries as well, right? If you're jaywalking, if you're affiliating with people, how do you know you're affiliating? Because when your phone's in proximity to these people, they can say, oh, they have a connection, they have a relationship because every single day they spend this phone and this phone are near each other. It affects your social credit score. It affects your ability to access the economy. It changes your how much you have to pay for things. So it's driving you to be a good citizen or your life gets harder. Previously, it was, God's watching you and you're going to go to hell if you're a sinner. Some people hacked that and were like, I don't care. I'm going to be a sinner in this life and I'll deal with the consequences in the next life. Well, now the consequences are becoming immediate. So there's a lot of things going on. I'm pretty confident in what I'm saying right now. However, with a lot of these other topics out there, what's going on politically, what's going on in the news, what's going on with different conflicts around the world, what's going on with, let's say some trigger words, what happened with COVID, what's going on with vaccines, what's going on with things like autism, what's going on with spirituality, aliens, UAPs, UFOs, the food that we eat. There are narratives that come out. The truth is in there somewhere. But and what this what I keep to look at his name. What Chase Hughes talks about is like if you're seeing the extremes, chances are that's a psyop and manipulation. Nothing is typically all bad or all good, right? But a lot of times you have people, and why would something like what's in your food be manipulated? Well, you had all these products come out, like buy my essential oils, they'll solve all your problems. Essential oils are not going to cure every ailment in the world. Do they have a benefit and a place? Absolutely. But we get caught in these extreme mindsets. And I say that because I've been there. After my dad died of cancer, I was so freaked out by everything. I barely ate because I was so afraid of the food, and I thought essential oils were going to cure all my ailments in the world and didn't have to worry about anything ever again. We get caught in these traps sometimes. And sometimes the main goal is just to make money. Sometimes it's a lot deeper and more profound than that. So there's a lot of things that are happening. I'm really hitting a lot of my checkpoints right here. Obviously sometimes these things go on because they want to silence the opposition. I've thought about that a lot. Like I just released a podcast. I probably shouldn't put this out publicly, but I just released a podcast through our private site on future forecasting group, talking about a lot of the things that didn't make sense with things surrounding COVID. And that's all I'm going to say about it. Because, and I was so upset during COVID and everything that was happening because I'm looking at the news and I'm going, this doesn't make sense. But anytime you said it out loud, so many people were criticizing you. How dare you? You're a part of the problem. And so I just put this research together that I'm pretty solid in. And it's more on this stuff doesn't make sense. Why is this person have a relationship with this person when they really shouldn't because it's a conflict of interest, yet they're telling me to do this, but it doesn't make sense. So I did all that research on it, and I think it was very important research, but I was afraid to put it out there because of how many people were being canceled, how many people were being shut down, how many people were losing their jobs. I mean, it was a scary time when I've got a family and kids, right? Was I manipulated? Absolutely. Was I silenced? 100% I was. Did they get me? Yeah. Yeah, they did in terms of me having the comfort to exercise my free speech. Yes, that psyop worked. It scared me. Now it's a little bit easier to talk about with things as things are starting to come out. But it's very real. Whether I was right or wrong, I should be able to express things. That's the privilege, freedom, and responsibility of a gift like social media, right? We can say with freedom of speech, we should be able to say whatever we want. That has consequences. And now with something like the internet, those consequences could be very serious. And now with things like algorithms, those things we say and those things we put out AI can recognize that, and with the wrong person at the helm in charge of these social media companies, it could start feeding us things that reinforce our beliefs. And yep, look at these, talking about fate, right? Tribe. Look at these millions of people who are telling me the earth is flat. I'm not alone. Look at all this data. Look at all this evidence. Look at all these experts that are saying these things. And that's all that, and then you label the enemy, the opposition, right? Oh, flat earth deniers. Look at that. So now you've got this tribalism that's going on. All of a sudden, you're down this rabbit hole. You're confident in this. Is it correct? Or are you just being fed something to keep you trapped in a particular line of thought? So it's dangerous stuff in terms of, and what are the impacts of that? Well, when you start getting algorithms for people who are susceptible to be manipulated to do harm, and that's where it gets dangerous. And why do I have to keep? This is my ADHD. My short-term working memory is awful. Chase Hughes was talking about the creation of Manchurian candidates, and he referenced something I'm very familiar with in terms of my own research in Food for the Archons. I talked about the Milgram experiment. And I've talked about it on this show several times, but that experiment I think is so important in understanding human nature. And he was wording it in ways that were really simplifying what it means, the significance of it that really resonated with me. So the Milgram experiment, they had two people in a room plus a scientist in a white lab coat, and they were doing this experiment. And it was the teacher and the student. The teacher's on one side of the wall, the student's on the other side of the wall. The teacher walks around, the lab technician takes the teacher around, he introduces him to the medical student or to the student, and he says, "Okay, you're going to be asking this guy questions." And he sees the student's hooked up to electrodes that's hooked up to some kind of electric device. Teacher then goes on to the other side of the room. Teacher asks the student questions. The student gets a question wrong. Teacher shocks the student. Every time the teacher shocks the student, the voltage goes up. And what they found in that experiment was that 100% of the participants administered a shock high enough to cause harm. And something like 67% of the participants administered a shock that was fatal even after the participants stopped responding, simply because the authority, they established that authority, right? They have a new focus, that novelty where they're looking at this crazy experiment they're a part of. They have an authority who's saying this is okay. When they say, I don't know, he stopped responding, what should I do? The authority would simply say, it's important that you continue with the experiment. So they were able to convince 67% of participants to commit murder. And that's what this guy, Chase Hughes, was saying. I'm so bad with names, man. That's what Chase Hughes was saying. Um, they are willing, you can easily, and he said it took 45 minutes to convince people to commit murder. We all want to sit here and say, that won't be me. Some of us, I think that's accurate. I think and this is my experience working with a lot of demographics of kids and having being neurodivergent myself. And I say this saying I've been manipulated. I just admitted to that. So I'm not sitting here saying I'm some kind of hero. But I think neurodivergent minds are are a great resistance to this. If you've ever known anybody guilty with oppositional defiant disorder, they do the opposite I think it's a natural defense to manipulation. Which can still be manipulated, but they do the opposite of what anyone's going to tell them to do. Stand up. They're going to sit like when somebody, except not counting my military experience, but somebody walks in, especially if it's somebody who I don't really know, and I see, oh, they're trying to motivate people, and I haven't bought into this thing yet, and they're like, everybody stand up. I will be the last person in the room to stand. I may eventually stand. So yeah, I guess they got me. That's because the tribe is doing it, right? And I'm doing it with them. But I think your ODD people are the ones who, in a situation like that Milgram experiment, might sit there and go, I don't care what you're saying. I'm not going to kill this person. They stop responding. It's not okay. But I can also see myself being put in a certain state of mind where I'm like, oh, this is okay. It's part of the experiment. They would never really let the person die. And they're telling me it's okay. So I'm going to do it. If you buy into it, I can see that mindset. And that's a scary thing. And we need to recognize that. And we need to be able to put things in place in our mind when something doesn't feel right, we need to break the hypnosis that we're getting put under right then and there because we don't want to pay that bill. That is not something we want to allow ourselves to do. And I think one of the best ways we can do that is to know our own mind. And that's not easy. I've been spending years trying to get better at understanding how my mind works. And I do that in a variety of ways. I write. As an author, I get to explore all these ideas and feelings and thoughts in my mind. I put them into different characters and I get to like really pick things apart. I journal. I journal every day, not in great detail all the time, but I evaluate my mental health every single day and I write and I rate myself on how it's going. I pay attention to how things affect me. Where do my thoughts come from? What impacts do these different things have on me? And I meditate. I meditate. Right now, I'm at a point where I'm meditating twice a day, plus doing yoga, where I'm just being mindful of what's going on in my mind and my body. And those things, as I've said in my books and on the podcast, I, I've I don't want to say things like I've gotten really good because the second you say that, and it's like, but they got you here. That's my anxiety talking. Um, but let me say it this way. I have developed a system of trying to recognize what's me and what's an influence coming from me. I have this narrative, belief, thread in my mind right now that I talk about on the show about spirituality, about AI, about the human mind and consciousness and transcendence and all this stuff. Some of that I have obtained through direct experience, and I'm confident in it. But there are things that I say, and I tried not to, but I know there are things that I say that I have been told, and then I have shaped a belief system around it. I'm sure that exists. I think it's a very good mental exercise for us to do on a regular basis to look at our beliefs and ask ourselves, where did this come from? How does this hold up? One of the ways we do that is having an open mind to being able to really entertain an opinion that differs from our own. Oh, that's easy. I'm open-minded. I can do that. Really? Then let's try this. I'm afraid to even say this online. Trump is a good president. Biden is a good president. Whichever one resonates with you or doesn't resonate with you, can you have a conversation with somebody and listen to them go through their talking points as to why they believe that? Kamala Harris would have been the best president in the world. Can you listen to somebody say those things about you? I'm saying these things for examples. By saying them, this is my fear. By saying them, I'm not saying one person is good, bad, indifferent, really. Um, but these are very triggering, polarizing topics. Can you have a conversation about that right now, today, with someone who you know believes that and you absolutely do not? Can you listen to them and take away from it, okay, they have done some good things. Doesn't mean you have to love them. A lot of us can't right now. That's a problem. When we are polarized, we are now in that tribal state and we're not at war with each other. We can't work together because we have such harsh judgments. Why? That's the manipulation. Why is it happening? I have my theories, but I don't know. But I don't know that it's, unless you trust, unless this is where you're coming in and saying, well, I trust in my God, I trust in my leadership, authority, right? That fate model, we're trusting in that authority to tell me everything's going to be okay. Well, the people doing the Milgram experiment trusted in their authority to tell them everything was going to be okay. The soldiers in Nazi Germany trusted in their authority to tell them everything was going to be okay. Sometimes we need to unplug and we need to sit and think on our own. Take time every day. If you can't meditate, journal. Sit there quietly. Take 20 minutes. That's all it takes. And meditation, that's a whole different conversation. And I talk about that in my Reiki courses if you're interested. Yeah, I know that was a shameless plug. But I talk about these things. It doesn't, it's not as hard as it sounds if you're not a meditator, if you're not good at it, if you're new to it. There are ways you can train your mind to it. And you have to understand that, yes, this is what this is physical reality. This is political. This is what's the word I'm looking for? This is more than just a spiritual thing, but this is also a spiritual thing, right? This is how we live our life, how we access the world. And I think we should bring our own spiritual path into this. And that should be a state of mindfulness and awareness, getting to know ourselves. Because once we can better understand ourselves and understand our needs and our wants, we can better understand what's going on in the world and how we interact with it. And I think that's very important here. Um, I'm looking at my notes here, and I think I've covered everything I wanted to cover without even looking at my notes. So I'm pretty awesome. I'm going to look at, I don't even know if I'm going to get to the Chat GPT conversation. Maybe I will. I'll skim through it in a second. But I'm on a roll right now, and I want to talk about um, manifesting. And I'd say this is a combination of a belief and of knowledge for me in terms of manifesting. From what people talk about with manifesting, it's the basic premise of it is, let me backtrack. Greg Braden, years ago, when I was writing Food for the Archons, doing my research, he talked about a Native American friend of his who showed him he was going to go do a rain dance to make it rain because they were experiencing some major drought in the Southwest. And he said he went with his friend and he went into this sacred stone circle. I guess it was an energy point. And the friend went in there and he got real quiet for like 30 seconds. Then he walked out. He says, "That's it?" He goes, "Yeah, that's it." And he said about an hour later, they hadn't had rain in weeks. The skies opened up and they got this torrential downpour so bad that everything was flooded. And he joked, I'm stealing Greg Braden's material here. He says, yeah, we figured out how to make it happen. We just haven't figured out how to turn it off and how much we need. Kind of as a joke, because I got so much rain that came in. He says, how'd you do it? He says, did you just go in and ask for rain? He says, no. When you communicate, I want it to rain with the universe or whatever this system is, what that's interpreting is you're sending a message of, it's not raining. I don't have rain. Things are dry. You need to feel that feeling of the rain on your face and the excitement you have that you did it. You focus on the celebration and that feeling of it's already happened. That was a huge shift for me. How many of us, if we've prayed in the past, God, please make him better. Please help him beat this disease. What you're reinforcing is this person is sick. This person is sick. So, what I've learned and have done is to, if I can hold myself in that mindset of manifestation, of it's already happened, and like really believe it, and you really start to live your life that way for whatever it is that you're trying to bring into existence, it starts to happen. You start to see things that align with that. You start to call these things into your being, right? Same thing if I was like purple trucks are the most important thing in the world. Every purple truck you see means that you're validated. I guarantee you start believing that, you're going to start seeing purple trucks everywhere because your focus changes and you're focused on those things. What if I said business opportunities are the most important thing in the world? And all of a sudden, you start looking at, oh, this is training opportunities for business. They all start coming to you because you believe it, right? You start to resonate with that. So I've been, I had some time off, and that's really where this started. My job is busy. I'm in constantly being called to different mini crises at my job. I work in education. I work with emotionally charged students. So my job is hard. So all day long, it's like, Dennis, I need you, Dennis, Dennis, like all day long, I'm just running and it's emotionally draining on my energy. And I don't have time to focus on these things as much as I'd like to, on my writing, on my spirituality, on my meditations, on just unplugging and recharging. So we were on our spring break and I went to Florida to visit family. And it was sunny and I didn't have any obligations other than the things that I wanted to do. And it was beautiful. And I realized two things: sunshine and time. I go through, being aware of my mind, seasonal depression. Um, so when the skies are gray for a couple of months, I do a lot of things to try to combat that. And this year was my best year in 5 years, I should say. But something about having a couple warm days and being outside and not having any responsibility, man, that was a reset. And unplugging from all of the noise that's constantly being thrown at us, guess whose voice I really started to hear strongly? Mine. How many voices that sound like our own in our head? How many thoughts that sound like our own voice in our head are our own ideas and objectives? How many are the agendas of someone else? We really need to think about that. And when we can, number one, take some time for you every single day to unplug, you can find your path. And when you can get a little bit more consistent time to be somewhere where you're comfortable and relaxed, and doesn't necessarily have to be sunshine on a beach, you can be somewhere where you feel good and you can be quiet and alone with your own thoughts for an extended period of time. You can really start to find your way. Then you have to ask yourself, why is our work schedule the way it is? Why are our jobs so time consuming for us? We're so drained by the end of the day, right? And I'll kick back to my archons research, out of the Garden of Eden from the Gnostic works. The archons threw mankind into a life of chaos so they would be distracted from matters of the Holy Spirit. Okay? I'm not saying that in a religious sense, but think about that. We're so drained from everything else going on. We don't have time to focus on our spirituality, and our spirituality is life. I'm not saying you need to adopt a certain belief system. I'm saying getting in touch with yourself and finding your path on the way that's going to maximize your own happiness. Believe it and manifest it. It's there. But there is so much, I'm careful I say this, there is so much coming at you that it's hard, but not impossible. My life hasn't always been easy. My life hasn't always been happy. But when I can get into the flow state that I'm in right now, we can change the world. And by change the world, I mean we can change our world. We can change our own world. And by changing our own world, we're interacting with the worlds and universes of everybody else around us. And I've got some very unique remote viewing data that I've shared with all of you. If you look at my life after death session, um, we have that real power. But it starts with us, and it starts in here, it starts in here, and we can do it. Um, I believe it, and I encourage you, start small. Start small. Um, if you're looking for more resources or you're looking to connect with me further on this, I do have, I wasn't intending to do a sales pitch here, but I do have services available. If this is something you're interested in starting to build, you can reach out through sixsensemedia.net and we can work on putting a plan together once we understand what your goals are. So you can reach me at sixsensemedia.net and just click on through the Reiki tab. There's a consulting piece there. All right. Moving on back into this flow here, I want to talk about my chat GPT. I'm not going to share my screen, but I am going to talk about chat GPT real quick, and then I'm going to close out the show here. Um, so I said here, I prompted it. Imagine you're an agent with a government agency that monitors internet activity. What categories or groups would you put people in? And what would you do with that information? I also asked it some personal stuff that I don't think I'm going to share here, but I wanted to know how it would place me. He said, if I were an agent with a government agency monitoring internet activity, the categories or groups I use would be something like this. Threat assessment groups for national security or public safety monitoring. Low risk, general population, typical use, typical internet use. Moderate risk, flagged keywords, but probably benign, researching conspiracy theories but not acting on them. High risk, planning or promoting harmful activities. Critical risk, known criminal or terrorist affiliations, imminent threats. Then his second group would be interest and ideology clusters to analyze public sentiment, trends, and potential social movements. Spiritual and metaphysical communities, it's like Reiki, remote viewing, energy healing, conspiracy theorists, is QAnon, flat Earth, 5G paranoia, etc. Activists, environmental, political, social justice, crypto enthusiasts, blockchain, DeFi, financial sovereignty groups, prepper and survivalists, self-sufficiency, off-grid living, etc. General public consumers, mainstream behavior, entertainment, and shopping. Think of how valuable that information is just from a marketing standpoint. His next group, group number three, I say his, AI's next group, influence and research groups. To gauge influence, potential to shape public opinion, we have low reach, moderate reach, and high reach. And the low reach is private individuals with minimal followers, moderate reach, which is niche audiences, small business, and personal brand, and high reach are influencers, viral content creators, and media figures. What would be done with the information? And the AI says, in theory, probably just monitoring trends, ensuring national security, identifying threats, and tracking potential influencers or movements that could destabilize or disrupt. Most people wouldn't trigger much more than passive monitoring unless they got involved in illegal activities or organized dissent. Do we want that to, here's the balance, right? Do we want that to happen? Absolutely. And I say this as a former counter intel guy, I would have loved to have access to this tool when I was working in intelligence. But in my opinion, as a private sovereign citizen, I don't want people collecting this information on me and categorizing me because it could potentially be an infringement of my freedom. Let me give a sidebar here. The other day, I was driving down the highway and the state police had a roadblock. So immediately I'm nervous and I'm mad. I got nothing to hide. I got nothing illegal in my car. I'm an ex-cop, right? I'm one of the good guys, right? You shouldn't mess with me. And they were doing a random check where they wanted to check your registration, proof of insurance, driver's license, and is your inspection up to date? I have a problem with that. In my personal opinion, and legal experts can argue with me all you want, I think that it is a violation of my Fourth Amendment right from unlawful search and seizure. I don't think they have reasonable suspicion to articulate even beginning a traffic stop for me there. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's right. Now the argument would be, well, they probably made a public announcement saying they were going to be doing it, and you didn't catch the public announcement, so it's your fault. And therefore you consented to it. And by operating a motor vehicle, they have the right to check this, that, and the other. You're agreeing to all that stuff. That's great. But what are they doing? They're using that as an opportunity, and I do this because I was trained to do this, to talk to somebody and see if they can start developing reasonable suspicion to develop probable cause, take away your freedom, to charge you with a crime. That's the whole point of something like that. So it's very proactive, but, and many of us say, well, I'm willing to give up some of my freedoms if it's going to catch some people who are being bad. I'm not. And but was it a fight I was willing to fight? No. They changed my focus because I'm not used to having a roadblock there, right? I'm really quoting, look, I'm looking at his name again. I'm really quoting Chris Hughes a lot here, but it's resonating with me. They've already established authority. It's police. They're in their uniforms. They've got their hats on. They've got the lights flashing, right? Tribe. Well, I'm a citizen. So my tribe is, and that didn't really help me. But emotion, fear. I was afraid, right? Do I want to be sit here and be one of these people who's going to argue my rights and I'm not going to show you anything? What's that going to get me? I know I have nothing to hide, so I complied. I had all my stuff ready. Hey, trooper, here you go. And I just gave her my stuff. Oh, you're already prepared. Yes, I don't want to be bothered. And I went along my merry way. I also made a decision in that moment, fighting that battle. I'm not going to win. I'm just going to disrupt my own life and possibly burn some bridges with people who I may need as an ally at some point in time. So I complied, but I don't agree with it. Um, there's my little story there. All right, let me go back to ChatGPT. Uh, Sorry guys, I was in a flow. I think the last thing I'm going to read here, looking at spiritual and metaphysical communities. ChatGPT says, is it being influenced? Yes, 100%. This space is ripe for influence operations, both intentional by governments, think tanks, marketing agencies, and emergent from cult-like figures or movements. Why? Fragmentation of belief systems, creating division between different spiritual movements or between mainstream religion and alternative spirituality. Distraction from mainstream issues, encouraging deep dives into metaphysics, mysteries, and the cosmos can sometimes serve to divert attention from real world socio political challenges. Okay, guilty right there. You've got me. I spend more time looking at remote viewing, Mars, consciousness, astral projection, spirituality, all that stuff, and not getting involved in what's going on with the mainstream. Now I still have periphery over it, but yeah, 100% I get sucked into that stuff because I don't want to get involved in all that negative stuff. So I'm one less I was going down that path and I can develop a voice in that sphere that would have influence. I'm confident in that based on my experience. I don't want to. So mission accomplished, one less person to worry about, possibly. You have new age commercialization. There's heavy market influence, people being nudged into consumerism through courses, crystals, tech, etc. Not bad, but it's a form of manipulation. I think this is my problem why I'm not a great business person because like I give plugs. Obviously, I would like for you to use my services, but I try very hard not to manipulate people. At least I believe that I do. But there's other people who are really good at it. They really have a great pitch, they have a great setup, and they walk you into it. Doesn't mean my products aren't great, but I, I, I have a hard time trying to set things up with a goal of getting you to do something for me that's going where I'm going to profit from it. I deserve to profit from my hard work, but I have a hard time using manipulation. Potential radicalization. Certain movements push love and light messages to extremes, creating us versus them mentalities, often around awakening versus sheep narratives, which are easier to exploit. One of the things that Chase Hughes talked about, did you see how casual I was in remembering his name? Um, he says when you have the extremes, chances are it's manipulation. Extremes drive people. They really do. They really push you in a certain direction once you start following those extreme mindsets. Okay. The other area I'm going to look at, I'll look at the other two and then I'm going to wrap it up. The ChatGPT looked at remote viewing and fringe knowledge. Is it being influenced? Yes, selectively. These areas are monitored and influenced subtly, sometimes for testing information flows or gauging public reaction to classified ideas. How and why? Disinformation testing grounds. Ideas about UFOs, hidden history, psychic powers are used to seed disinformation or muddy the waters. So truth seekers get lost in rabbit holes. I worry about this a lot. This is why I try to be very objective, as I think, and I'm not a journalist, but as I think a journalist should be, in saying when something is my opinion, sharing my opinion. I try to cite the sources from where I get most of my information from. When it's a remote viewing target, I never go on there and say, this is right because I remote viewed it. I think we have a responsibility because I don't want to be a part of a disinformation campaign. Does that mean that the content I put out isn't used to support certain disinformation operations? No, it's as highly possible. The UFO thread that I'm so interested in right now, just because I'm quoting a government expert saying, yep, he's saying it, doesn't mean that government expert is giving us the truth. I trust in a lot of the remote viewing data we get, but that's not conclusive. It doesn't tell us what's really going on. It tells us we have information, we have data points on something anomalous, but we're feeding a narrative right now that we don't really know. There may be no such thing as aliens, as ETs. This may be something else. For all we know, this could be a chemical that's undetectable that's put in the water that gives us these experiences to then some kind of Project Bluebeam type of thing. I'm not saying that's what's happening. We don't know. So could the things that I talk about on my show be part of disinformation? Absolutely. I hope not. I try very hard to navigate between that, but I don't know. I could unknowingly be a mouthpiece for someone else's agenda that has nothing to do with what's most important or what's true. I acknowledge that. I try not to be. Crowdsourcing intelligence, back to the ChatGPT. Governments have historically monitored remote viewing groups to see if useful intel emerges, especially on geopolitics or sensitive sites. I guarantee that's happening with the work coming out of Future Forecasting Group. And then controlled leaks. Sometimes insiders release truths to this crowd to test reactions, distract, or prep the public for future narratives. I'm pretty sure that's what's been going on with UFOs and UAPs over the last 50 years. It's been gradually coming out. Uh, and then conscious healing and energy work. Is it being influenced? Yes, with a twist. This category is being co-opted by both commercial interests and cultural psyops. How and why? Mass pacification. Promoting personal healing and love light ideology can, at scale, reduce public unrest. It channels energy inward, then outward into activism or rebellion. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing because I don't know that activism and rebellion are always necessary. Now, here's is this manipulation right here. Everything I just talked about manifesting, right? This is my belief, but what if there's no basis in truth? Can we influence our world around us through other means in terms of meditation, spiritual practices, intention work? Is that really a thing that can change cultural things instead of going the route of I choose violence and I'm going to fight this? I don't know. At what point? I mean, look at Gandhi, and I'm not an expert in his life and how things worked out. Did he achieve his goal? And I don't have the answer to that. I just know he was a pacifist. Dr. King, right? Dr. Martin Luther King. I mean, he was killed, but he had a nonviolent approach that had a major impact on the world. You have divide and conquer, sparking debates over real versus fake healers, different Reiki styles, or approved versus dangerous spiritual practices can fracture communities. I see this in remote viewing regularly. People arguing over different styles, different claims, and at the end of the day, who cares? If it works and you get good data and you're being honest about it, or if you find spiritual growth and fulfillment from it, then who cares? When these people start coming in criticizing things, I welcome criticism if the criticism is helpful to my growth. If you're criticizing me just to be a troll, I don't even read it. I delete it. I could care less because that's not helping anything. So that division, it deters people. It shuts people down. It distracts us from arguing over, is this the right approach over, hey, how good your data and how can we do this better? Future Forecasting Group does a great job of having people with multiple disciplines of remote viewing. Not once behind the scenes or on camera have we ever argued or debated anyone's style. We just praise when everybody does well, and we laugh at ourselves when we make a mistake or a way off. And look at love us or hate us, look at how well Future Forecasting Group is doing. I'm not talking financially. I'm talking in terms of the products that we put out consistently with remote viewing and how good that data is. And it keeps getting better. All right, last one here. Consumerism versus spirituality, subtle psyop to commodify spiritual growth. If you're buying the next thing, you're, quote, evolving. Keeps people on the hamster wheel of spiritual materialism. I am proud that for the most part, what I was saying here, despite the couple plugs that I did, was go out and sit by yourself. You don't have to buy anything. You don't have to do anything. Start listening to your own mind. Okay, let's move on here. Why would they influence these categories? This is the last thing I'm going to read here. To control and predict behavior. Knowing how people in these spaces think and react, you can predict social dynamics. There's some value in that. Channel dissent into harmless avenues. Instead of protesting, people meditate. Instead of fighting for systemic change, people seek personal ascension. Now, I mean, that's exactly what I've been talking about, right? So, am I being influenced? Or am I correct in doing these things can bring about change? Or is it both? I don't know, but it's interesting. Market expansion. Big companies can easily profit from spiritual trends, especially with data-driven marketing. That's correct. Monitoring for threats. Some fringe thinkers uncover real truths. Governments may influence the narrative to discredit or mislead. Okay. Um, I feel good. I was upset listening to this because I get very upset realizing how heavily we're being influenced for purposes that don't necessarily serve us or our greater good, the common man, the common woman. But I think there's a lot that's empowering here, and there's a lot that we can do. But the first step is taking control of your own mind. And that's not easy. Your own mind is your own worst enemy at times. As in remote viewing, that's the hardest thing to what's the word, to control is your own mind. But other people, other organizations, other technology are really good at it. Really good at it. And we take it for granted. We want to go to work, eat junk food, come home, watch reality TV, and just absorb the signals while we're doom scrolling. We need to take more responsibility for our own minds. And I can guarantee if we can take more responsibility for our own thoughts, we'll end up taking more responsibility for our communities, our actions, and bring about change. I do believe that, psyop or not. And I'm not saying that's a psyop. I believe that. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I'm being manipulated to further feed you with that information to then cause you to not do a certain thing or to do a certain thing, which is then going to drive someone else's agenda. That's my fear. That's possible. But at some point, we have to make a decision. So I say, what have you got to lose? Go sit by yourself every day for a little bit of time, for a month, for 30 days, and see how you change. See what difference it makes. If you don't like it, if it didn't work, nothing changed, you didn't get any new ideas, move on with your life. You really haven't lost much. All right, friends. I'm going to wrap it up here. Um, I I appreciate you taking time to listen. I believe in all of you. I believe in what this means and what potential that we have. And I know that things may seem scary right now, but I think we can move into a really beautiful existence, but it's based on the choices we make, even if it feels like the world is burning around us. We can still build community. We can still do better. I believe that this is opportunity. Hard times create opportunities that we can take advantage of. Please don't forget that in these dark times. Um, quick plug, promotional plug, just a teaser here. I'm working really hard on finishing The Hive book three, the final conclusion to the series. It's awesome. I'm really enjoying this process. I'm getting a lot of things in my own life, just understanding things through this journey. The ending, I already have the ending written out in my mind, so I'm now building towards that. It's like I know where the big, wow conclusion that I want to have, and then I have to build a backstory, which is already, it's like remote viewing. The whole story is in my mind. So I'm expecting it to be about 50,000 words. I'm 36,000 words in. So I'm close. So I'm hoping by summer I'll be actually releasing the book. I'll have more announcements and some teasers coming soon. All right, friends. If you're still with me, thank you so much. I appreciate every single one of you, and I wish you all the best in your journey. If you're looking for some support along that, please feel free to reach out, sixthsensemedia.net, where you can find everything that I've talked about here. I'm Dennis Nappy II with The Secret Podcast. Remember to never stop questioning, keep an open mind, let your intuition be your guide. Thank you.
I said, empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow, or it can crash. Be water, my friend, be water, my friend. Be water, my friend, my friend. Be water, my friend, my friend, my friend.